Hello, everyone, and welcome to another show here on Dojo Live this Thursday, October 20th, 2022. My name is Kim Landis. It's my pleasure to host along with America Guerrero today.
Hey, everybody.
Hi,
Excited.
America. Yes, it's a
Excited.
great conversation. I think I say this every single time, but it's always super, super fun to have all women on the screen. So thank you so much for joining us. Our guests today are Dawn Delatte and Emily Bahna. Ladies, I did not even ask you before we connected. Did I pronounce your last names correctly? Please correct me if I was wrong.
It's a lot.
Delatte.
Delatte.
Okay.
Delatte. Okay.
All
I
right,
thought that it was
Delatte.
French.
I usually get that one done in our pre-show talk, but I spaced it. My apologies. Emily Delatte. They are managing directors at Thoughtbot, and we're here to talk all about product strategy from every stage. But before we do, Dawn, Emily, we would love to get to know you a bit better. If you could sort of share your stories, your passions, and what's sort of led up to your time with Thoughtbot. Thank you. I can pick someone, or you can look the teacher in the eye. We'll go with Emily. Emily, why don't you kick us off? Tell us about you.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Bahna, and I am a managing director at Thoughtbot. I manage a team called Liftoff, where we work on complex first version products, but mostly what we're doing is building new products, new software-based products that are set to actually, go to market and eventually move into new innovative spaces. So we work with folks who are entrepreneurs that have a new idea, that have gotten, a decent amount of funding. They understand their market and they need to build out an initial product, and they don't have a team or a technical partner to do that with at that point. We also work with established companies that want to move into an innovative space, and they don't necessarily have folks that can build new product or understand sort of the world of experimentation and having the resources to move over to that space to test out a product that may or may not enter into their mainstream. So it's sort of being smart by hiring folks that focus in on really launching new products into the marketplace.
Yeah, every company is a tech company, they say these days, right?
Yes. And what's so exciting to me is I've been doing this for a long time. I come from a design background, user experience design. I was a graphic design, then became a user experience designer. Now I manage new product. But it's exciting to work in the startup world because people are trying to solve problems, and they're always so interesting. Oh, sorry.
It's all right, folks. For those of you who are listening, Emily, there's a motion sensor. She's joining us from a quaint library in New York, and she has to activate that motion sensor every now and then. No worries.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to work with folks who are looking at the world in a new way, trying to solve problems, trying to improve the way we work. And it's always exciting to, dive into those and see them come alive,
For sure. For sure. Well, thank you. How about you, Dawn? What's your story?
Hi, I'm Dawn Delatte. I feel like I'm about to repeat a lot of what Emily said, both from our professional experience and the kind of people we work with, but we do a slightly different sort of set of work or set of services. So I also have a design background. I came to Thoughtbot 6 years ago as a product designer. And I've spent a lot of time designing products and facilitating product design sprints and things like that. Now I'm the managing director of our Ignite team, which is slightly earlier stage than the group of customers that Emily works with. But you would define them, very similarly. So we work with entrepreneurs who have either a strong hypothesis about a new opportunity or product idea, or they're sort of in this validation stage of really sort of understanding what the opportunity is. And so, and they also tend to be like pre-funding, sort of, strong product mindset. Um, and similarly, we work with existing businesses who are looking to like scale their business by like digitizing some portion or really like getting their business online at all. And also with enterprise organizations that just don't have that innovation muscle. Again, we're working in the earlier stages though. So a lot of the work we do is based around, customer research, customer discovery, market research, assumptions testing, and like I said, really validating the market opportunity and understanding like the space that this potential product might exist in, so that we can make all the right foundational product decisions together.
Right.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, please.
I was just going to add that we also launch products, but they're usually tools and systems that are an extension of that validation process. So it's a little more like proof of concepts and very early versions, what you might consider a true minimum viable product.
Right. It sounds super fun. It's super dynamic. Really having to get the blood flowing a lot, creativity of testing. It's going to be interesting. And with that, let's talk about the topic that you chose today, which is product strategy at every stage. And we're looking to answer the question of,
why is leveraging product strategy expertise more critical now than ever? And how can it be done from idea to MVP and beyond? So who wants to share why this is important for today's topic? Let's go with Emily.
Great. Yeah, this is an important topic, obviously, for us right now. And I think there are a lot of different, with technology moving as fast as it is, we've got a lot more choices, when we think about building a product. And so, but also with a lot of different choices, it's hard to figure out what's the right way to move forward. And what has always been true is when building out product, you really have to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. A lot of people just jump right into wanting to build something, and thinking that they're kind of going all in. But there's a lot of what we are seeing sort of in the marketplace is the real importance of doing your due diligence, of doing the market research, spending time understanding who your customer is, as well as when you have validated the market research, understanding that it's a continuous sort of agile process to kind of continually test and validate. Even as you kind of start to build out the product, you want to kind of put a practice in place that enables you to really de-risk the project, because building product can be extraordinarily expensive, and there's lots of ways to fail. And figuring a great product strategy and good product management can really help you de-risk a lot of those factors.
yeah,
And the world is just getting more and more complex, where the type of things that you are going to confront, you really need someone to help navigate you through that process.
yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Here in Mexico, there's a saying. It says something like "lo barato sale caro," right? And that would be translated to the cheap things end up being expensive, right? So when you try to cut corners or do things not maybe the right way from the very start, you actually end up spending more time, energy, and money, fixing it if you had just done it, quote unquote, right the first time. And I think that's really tapping into to what you're talking about. You mentioned that now is more complex than ever. So what is making now? What are some of these complexities? I mean, I have perhaps my theories, but I'd like to hear why. Why is now more important than ever?
So we are more interconnected more than ever. So when we talk about products, we're not building just a single product or a single point of service any longer. You're building something that needs to exist within an ecosystem. So you're not just building, this one little thing, or you're living in a little local town and like all you have to care about is that particular area. We're global these days, but also everything that we tap into, we're tapping into third-party applications. We're dealing with security. We're dealing with lots of, and in order for your business or idea to succeed, within this.
Let's dance.
Sorry, complex world, and all of that. It's just, there's just a lot more complexity to how we live, and also the demand of what we're expecting. It requires a lot more understanding that it's not just a single point that you're solving for, that it has to exist in a larger ecosystem.
And I think, go ahead, America.
Yeah, which is the industry that has surprised you? Because I know that fintech, healthcare, cybersecurity, they are already in this tech world. But for example, I'm thinking of farming. They are exploring more options to digitalize, or using analytics or using tools. Which is the industry that has surprised you these days?
Or Dawn, maybe that's a good question for you. Like, who's coming in? Who's tapping Thoughtbot on the shoulder more and more these days of, we need this help?
Yeah. I think the industry that's coming to mind is like legal tech, because they've been an industry slower to adopt new technology. I think healthcare, or health tech and fintech, they've really seized the opportunity so much that, kind of like what Emily was saying, they're sort of creating some of these complexities. The competitive landscape there is like so vast. And there's all these sort of like tooling integrations you have to consider. It's not, it's devices, it's like services, it's products, it's like all these really complex things having to work together. Legal tech, or legal companies, or the industry in general has been a little bit slower to adopt. And so I can see some sort of, entrepreneurs and even, attorneys themselves sort of starting to think more innovatively and coming to us and saying like, help us to scale, help us to like make our business more effective, more efficient, more impactful. And you see a lot of people caring more about, serving, certain groups of people, or certain parts of the industry that require them to be a little bit more innovative. So that's one that comes to mind, but I'm sure there are many others.
Thank you. So let's get back to, before the show, we were talking a little bit about how a lot of people in a lot of ways have different definitions. And I think two of these examples were just product strategy as well as MVP. But what do you define product strategy as, or what makes for a good product strategy? Is there a 1, 2, 3, or is it something that it completely varies depending on every type of industry, client, desire, etc.?
So I can kick off this one, but I think, Emily will have a different perspective, because I think product strategy does and maybe should mean something different, at the different, stages that you're applying it. Part of what is important about product strategy at the early stage is that, you're not just answering the question of what should we build. It's and it's not even just how should we build it, it's should this be built? And I think that's a really important question to start with. Both should be built and what is the problem, or is there a problem? Really, using strategy to support that more scientific sort of approach to thinking about this, and building a hypothesis and testing your assumptions, and sort of stress testing through this sort of extended validation period, where you're like, you know, giving people some concepts, and sort of gauging interests and exploring products, services, and other ways, other systems that you can implement to innovate in these new industries or these new spaces. So um, I would say that's really how we think about strategy, and how it can really support this stage of your business and product life cycle. And then that principle is carried through to the stages in which you're like actually building software for people. Um, but then you sort of add on, the more complex processes and things like around product management, that I can let Emily speak to a little bit more.
Yeah, Emily, what's product strategy for you in the stage that you work with your team?
Yeah, so at the stage that we sort of take over is when enough of the research has been done, it's been validated that it's worth investing to kind of build out the product. So we're initially kind of building out that initial product roadmap. So what should be built, first. It is also bringing together the team and the skill sets that are required to build out the product. So making sure that we've got the appropriate cross-functional skill sets that are required. But product strategy kind of sits sort of in the our product strategists and product managers really lead the effort of the project, and is the connection and glue point in terms of all the different things that are needed to make smart decisions. So they are connected to the stakeholders or the product owners and the subject matter experts. They understand the business and sort of what the goals are around that. Then they take that information and bring it to the team to kind of build out what the requirements are for the product roadmap, and what is most critical to build first to create viability, to test, and all of that. And then it is sort of managing the team and making sure that they've got the right information for them to dive deep into their skill sets and be able to help solve the problem and build out that first version product. So there's a lot going on in terms of product strategy. It means understanding what success looks like, how to measure it, but also how to execute on it by understanding the right skill sets that need to be put in place, and how to motivate the team so that they understand what's going on. I think a lot of some of the big mistakes that happen in terms of not having a product manager on a project or a product strategist is that you lose that glue that brings everything together. If you've got a development director or someone leading development, and you're asking them to dive deep in technology and then also think about all the big business decisions that have to be made. And so it's spreading your team. You have to be careful about spreading your team too thin, and doing too many things that are taking away from the area that they can add the most value. And so having a cross-functional team, like I talked about in terms of the complexities of what we're talking about, having folks focus in on those areas and then come together to work together on the problem is what's most effective as well as most successful on these types of projects.
What you're saying is interesting to me, because I feel like on one hand, you want individuals to do what they do best, the very best they can, which is sort of this, let's say, one-track minded, mentality, but also at the same time strike this balance with what's happening in the bigger picture across the team. How do you what are some methods or approaches like that you to utilize to help keep your team members engaged, healthy, knowledgeable, and yet, focused on their specific piece of the puzzle, how you will. Are there any strategies that you might like to share with, people like you? What have you found that works?
Well, number one, putting a product manager on.
Get a product manager. Get a product manager.
That must be a value.
But as a product manager, I guess, what are the strategies that you utilize?
Yeah, so
that have worked?
the strategies are, number one, being able to connect with everybody on an individual basis and understanding how they like to work, and just understanding and just really getting to know people. And that goes across both the team members as well as the stakeholders and the product owner. So just being a real point of contact for everybody. That's number one. The other, number two, is, there's process in place to kind of, we usually have like a Monday planning session where, being able to disseminate that information, what's most important to the team, in terms of what are the top priorities, just understanding, bringing folks together. Sometimes we kick off a project with a design sprint just so that we're all sort of on the same level, or sort of trying to solve the problem at the same time. We're all sort of aligned, and it's not just sort of coming down in a waterfall way. But in general, once a project, once we've settled on what the product roadmap is and all of that, it's sort of weekly planning, like Monday planning session. There's daily stand-ups to kind of ensure that we understand what people are working on. And then we've got retros at the end of each week, especially if things start to shift or change, or if there are things that are blockers and things like that. But constant, a communication that's not too overwhelming gives enough people some autonomy to kind of go deep in what they want to do, but allows people to understand what everybody else is working on. And then having someone who can kind of be, really tap into what's going on. A lot of times, the stakeholder may or may not be involved on the project on a daily basis. And so, but they're in meetings and they're learning information that's relevant to what's going on with the team. And so having someone be proactive at, really following what's going on and making sure that everybody understands, all the different decisions that are being made, so that impact on the project becomes less risky.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting role and a really interesting balance of where you have to have the hard skill sort of knowledge, but be really, really good at the soft skill side, the communication side, especially when there's so many different kind of players. And this reminds me, it actually reminded me of a quote. I don't know, perhaps you've heard this before, by C.S. Lewis, and it's talking just about progress and, roadmaps and moving forward. And he says something, I Googled it while we were speaking. It says, we all want progress, but if you're on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. And in that case, the man or woman who turns back soonest is the most progressive. How have you, maybe Dawn, going to the beginning, the very, very beginning of even should this be built, or, okay, we're building it, and then, oh gosh, this isn't working the way that we thought, or we found this new piece of data, or whatever it might be. Do you agree with this mindset? And if so, what techniques do you utilize in order to turn around and convince others around you to also make that turn?
Yeah. So Emily started to talk about this, and I think this is this is critical in the beginning and all throughout your product life cycle, to continue being innovative. But it's, so we start this in our product design sprint process, but it's the idea of team or group consensus around the problem to be solved. And that can be broken down, even more granularly in the problems that we're trying to solve, with every sort of, component of this product or this business. So with the team aligned on the problem to be solved, and that being sort of the source of truth that you can always reflect back on whenever something new pops up, and it does all the time. New information that we're learning, from the market or new ideas and things like that. We can go back to, is this solving the problem that we agreed on was the most important thing? Is this still a problem anymore? Like, there has to be some source of truth, and team consensus on like how we're going to, use that to make sure that, we're all sort of staying on the same path. And so, like, one of the techniques, for instance, is whenever we're building the product roadmap and like translating that into like, product management software. A lot of people, use Kanban style boards and translate things into user stories or tickets. We, a couple of years ago, and this has been evolving since we've learned more in terms of best practice, switched from a like very user story or like ticket based way of writing out that stuff to a jobs to be done. So what is the job that this feature or this thing is doing to solve the problem that we all agreed that we're trying to solve right now? So it's little things like that that help us to it it's very easy to just sort of keep chugging along and keep building stuff, and keep designing stuff. Having a product manager is great for helping identify those red flags, but these little things along the way too help us to identify like, hey, it feels like we're getting a little off track here, or this isn't really solving a problem for the problem, for solve a solution for the problem we all agreed on.
That's really
So
interesting. Like
Yeah.
the way the nomenclature of making sure that what you're saying focuses on the why and not necessarily the what. Right? Because is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And you start that from the very beginning, but there's no reason why that shouldn't be carried through every time you're coming up on, um, I mean, honestly, every time you're doing planning, like, and this is just reiterating what Emily was saying, but um, the product manager is the glue, but it's essential for that product manager and for the team, and especially the clients and stakeholders, to believe that your technologists, your designers, your engineers, and your product teams, they're all like fundamental pieces of this. Everybody needs to be aware of, the business needs and the problem that we're trying to solve, because if they're not, their decisions are made outside of that context, and someone's going to go down the wrong road, because even not one person can like keep, an entire product team um, on the same exact path. So yeah.
That's wonderful. I have heard during this show that communication, not too much communication, trust, being believe that you are a really important piece in the company. Those are really great values, but are there values that you found out that those are like really important to keep going with the projects or to build this amazing culture? What are those values?
Um, the one that comes to mind immediately for me is one that we often think about and go back to, which is trust. So, mutual trust and respect, and each other's like expertise and intention. Kind of like I was saying, having a product owner and a product strategist be the glue and the communication, but trust that they believe that every, you know, fundamental part of the product team, the designers, the developers, and the stakeholders, that everybody's going to do their part to contribute to this, overall goal. So yeah, trust, and mutual respect are big ones for us.
Emily?
Yeah, so I agree with Dawn on trust. It's I think the other one of our values is continuous improvement. And the role of the ability to allow for failure, in terms of being able to kind of give some folks the autonomy to kind of have some space to kind of test out some ideas. I think also another factor is just understanding sustainability of your team. Your team is your most important asset in terms of success. And a lot of times, when we're working with clients or stakeholders that have preset ideas of milestones as being success metrics, it's kind of rethinking what success is, having more of a growth mindset that success is what we've learned, how fast we've been able to stop and pivot, like you mentioned, the ability to understand that we're going down the wrong path and be able to pivot. But the other piece of it is not to burn out your team on fake milestones. You really need to be cautious of going at a pace where folks can actually be creative, where we can actually really solve those problems. And so at Thoughtbot, we really value trust is number one. Number two, continuous improvement, giving folks the space to be able to work on something and be able to see the ability to make improvements to it. And then the other one is self-directedness, giving folks enough autonomy to be able to focus and actually get the work done. So those are some of the things that we continue to foster within our own community.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, like with the trust and then the continuous development and the self-directedness or autonomy. Like it's sort of, to me, I see it as a chicken or the egg kind of thing, because if you're not allowing people to have autonomy or to learn from their mistakes, then it's going to go either one of two ways, right? It's going to build up that trust or it's going to break it down. And I think it's really beautiful to see how they work together in that sense. We're actually at the end of our half hour today, if you can believe it or not. Emily, Dawn, thank you so much for joining us, telling us about Thoughtbot, what you do, the way in which you're doing it, and of course, how product strategy is playing such a pivotal role in today's, industries and just tech companies in general. If you heard it here, everyone, first thing you can do, get that project manager in place. And so thank you so much again for joining us. We wish you and Thoughtbot nothing but success moving forward.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And then, of course, everyone, this is the final show of the week, but we do have our recap show on Monday, also at 10 o'clock Pacific. Join us as we talk about this week's shows, give you that recap, our opinions, and encourage you to watch them again and again and to share them, of course. And then we'll introduce next week's show. It is shows. It's a full week, another 3 full shows. So don't miss it, 10 o'clock Pacific. Until then, stay safe, everyone, and have a great rest of your week. Bye for now.